If you really want one of the fastest laptops on the market today, you might have come across Gigabyte Aero Y9 with Core i9 inside and RTX 2080. Even if you are convinced that you need it and have $3,500 for it, you should see this complete video, as I wish I knew all this before I bought it. There aren't many RTX laptops this powerful that you can come to a business meeting with. I needed something that looked professional and meet the demand for heavy 3D work in 3ds Max, 4K video editing, be color accurate, and good for virtual reality content production and consumption. So I was in the market for the best laptop I can get, and this laptop was satisfying all criteria under the surface. There is no unboxing as I have been using this for quite some time now. Let's see the specs first. It has Core i9 8950HK with turbo boost up to 4.8 GHz, 15-inch 4K IPS display with 100% of Adobe RGB space, 32 GB of RAM expandable to 64, 2 TB NVMe SSD, and you can add another one, an NVIDIA RTX 2080 with Max-Q, all of that packed into 19mm thick laptop, weighing only 2 kg. Now let's check I/O ports. Gigabit Ethernet port without any of those scissor gimmicks, USB 3.1 Gen 2 Type A port, HDMI 2.0 so it can support 4K, USB Type-C port with DisplayPort 1.4, audio combo jack, and on the other side, Kensington lock, power plug for 230 watt power supply, so this is watt not volts, 2 more Type A USB 3.1 ports but Gen 1 on this side, Thunderbolt 3, which I didn't need even once in the past 3 months, SD card reader, but the port doesn't swallow the whole card so you can't keep it in all the time. On the bright side, you will never forget it as it sticks out. Again, 4K IPS display with anti-glare, and I have to say it is an excellent anti-glare without the usual issues with color noise. And full Adobe RGB color space, which is wider than sRGB, and it is also Pantone certified display. It doesn't have touch support, which I do miss sometimes. Viewing angles are excellent. It has only 60 Hz and no FreeSync or G-Sync, but this is not primarily gaming machine. And there are no laptops with color-accurate 4K IPS display at above 60 Hz as far as I know. Let's talk about design and build quality. As I'm using this also for work, I needed a professional-looking laptop, or at least one that doesn't look like a teenage gaming machine. And the choice is limited there if you want all these specs. I'm not amazed by this design, but it is decent. I'm also not a fan of this material, and I still don't know which material it is. It may be partially anodized aluminum or something else, but it surely does look and feel like plastic. It doesn't look like a cheap plastic, but still, it doesn't look like a high-end product. It doesn't crackle like most plastic laptops though. The screen is offset all the way up, and the bezel is rather thin, but it has all these rubbery standoffs that ruin the appearance a bit. Since it is pretty thin, it flexes, so it feels like I will break it when I close the lid by pushing the edge. The back of it has a glowing Gigabyte logo, which cannot be turned off as it is probably part of the screen backlight, which brings me to a hinge. This is a big minus from me, as it doesn't allow laptop to be opened much, which makes it uncomfortable to use on a lap. Warning, don't use it without a proper lap barrier, especially this one. You may have noticed that there is no cooling holes on the side, and this is where the hot air comes out. It is similar to what Apple has been doing with their MacBooks, but worse for several reasons. It makes it louder, as the fan sound as well as the hissing air are coming up and not to the back. Under heavy loads, it sounds like this. Then you can't set it for rendering and close the screen, as it won't be able to cool itself with the hinge closing the cooling vents. Depending on the mouse you have, it may wake up your computer when you don't want, and if I would close the laptop when I go to bed, I would find it in the morning awake and fan on 60% trying to cool down. Since now they didn't have space on the top of the screen, they moved the webcam on the bottom of the screen. It has indicator that the camera is on, so you know that you're not being spied upon, and 2 microphones. In this time of working from home, this camera placement is really the worst for the video conferencing, and it looks like this when I'm sitting comfortably. Test, 1, 2, 3. You will have to slouch in your chair if you want other person to be able to see you. And if you're typing while talking, you better have your fingernails groomed. Webcam quality is the worst one I have used in a long time, both autofocus and grainy, so if you plan on making any game stream or tutorials with green screen, you will need to buy a proper webcam. You remember how bad video recording audio is when you are in the wind? Well, someone at Gigabyte didn't know, and they placed the microphones right next to air exhaust, so air rushes across them. It does some noise cancellation, but it also cuts off some of the frequencies from your voice. and on some recordings it sounds like you're swallowing some letters. Keyboard itself is decent, no squeezed keys, which is important for me for software development, so I don't have to adjust between using desktop and a laptop keyboard. It even has a number pad. It has standard function keys layout with additional max fan combo. It uses RGB lighting and you can customize color per key or have some effects, but I'm not a fan of how light leaks under the keys, that you can even see the dust trap under them. Another bad thing is that it uses PWM for color. PWM, or pulse width modulation, makes it use pulses at higher or lower frequencies depending on the brightness set, which most LED technologies uses. But this one uses PWM even at 100% brightness, which shouldn't be the case. So when you move your eyes around it, it leaves trails like this. In laptop designs, there are always compromises. You can choose a thin laptop with bad cooling or a thick laptop with better cooling. This one is former. As you can imagine, this one does thermal throttling very shortly on high CPU and GPU use, which brings the CPU clock down and you end up not having Core i9, but more like slower Core i7 on lower frequency. So one of these cooling pads is a must. The good thing is that I don't need it all the time. But for example, when playing a VR game, the CPU and GPU makes it into a 250 watt portable heater. I once tried connecting a TV while playing a VR game, but the laptop just shut down, as it was too much to push two 4K screens and one 1080p. The air intake is at the bottom, and it gets really hot there. There are also two tiny speakers there, but decent. There was no space for anything better. Then there is a touchpad, but I can't tell you anything about it as I never use touchpad, since no 3D program or anything else I do is suitable to be used with touchpad. I can tell you that it works good for two-finger scrolling on a long document. Battery is 94 watt-hours rated for 8 hours, but remember that I said the power supply is 230 watts. That means on the full load, the computer will use 230 watts in 1 hour. And the battery capacity is less than half of that. So if you are gaming or rendering using both CPU and GPU, even in theory the battery will last half an hour. So it will be good only to unplug the laptop and move it to another room or office. I accidentally unplugged the power the other day and I was using it for software development, which is a small task for this laptop. And as you can see, in 2 hours the battery went from 97% to 19%. The report was generated with this command. If you travel with it, make sure your airplane seat plug can support that power draw. Just to be clear, the power supply supports both American 120 volts and European 220 volts outlets. But power, as the rate of energy transfer, is 230 watts. I will not do any synthetic benchmarks, as you can find those online for both CPU and GPU, but it meets the expectations. Once this pandemic is over, I will compare it on some real-world tasks with the best MacBook Pro 16 that exists. But looking at their CPU and GPU specs, you probably know that the Gigabyte is better. As conclusion, even though it is far from perfect laptop, it is still one of the fastest ones and more suitable laptops for professional use mixed with gaming use. When you don't want to sacrifice CPU power, GPU power, display quality or portability. There are similar laptops with NVIDIA Quadro GPU, but they don't have as many CUDA cores, so video editing will suffer, simulations will be slower, and it won't be as suitable for gaming or VR applications. You can get a computer with similar performance for less than half this price if you get a desktop computer, so this only makes sense in the pre-COVID reality where the laptops were portable machines. For me in the past months, this was a desktop machine with heated palm rests. In the coming videos, we will explore its performance against MacBook and also getting a similar performance using a desktop computer and remote desktop solutions from a cheap laptop to get to high performance. Cheers!